Greetings, I am Enraged Eggplant and welcome to Dungeons and gURPS. In this video I'll explain my approach to making magic items in gURPS in the context of a D&D-style game. This is something that I have been struggling with a lot when making my switch to gURPS, and this is also something I have worked on a lot. As you know, both ancient tombs and magical emporiums are laden with various enchanted items. Even if your setting has its roots in D&D, the economic assumptions of gURPS make enchanted items more expensive, difficult to create, vulnerable to attacks, and, as a result, rare. The items themselves are very diverse. They could be traditional magic items, psionic devices, divine relics, or even objects imbued with the residual psychic energies, chi, or incarnum. If you remember my other videos, you know that I abolished the magic skills system in favor of magic as powers. Thus, regardless of the source, the item's effects must be represented with advantages to maintain internal consistency. And consistency is important, right? You would think that gURPS has many options for magic item creations, but there's actually not that many that I would consider proper. It might be different for you, but for me a proper enchanting system must include the following. A way to assign a monetary value to an item in a non-arbitrary way. This is important because the players will want to buy or sell magic items. A way to design custom enchanted items. For example, magic items in gURPS Magic for the magic skill system all have predefined effects and arbitrary costs. I want to be able to design my own item and have a way to determine its cost in a consistent way. A way to actually create the item. These items exist, but they are made somehow, right? For some GMs, telling the players that the items were made by NPC enchanters is enough, but I believe that if an NPC can do something, then the PCs should be able to do it too, if they wish to. If NPCs and PCs work by the same rules, the world will feel much more internally consistent. Even though enchanting items by the PCs does not come up very often, having a set of enchanting mechanics is always good. gURPS provides two ways of assigning an advantage-based item a monetary value, using Sorcerer's Enchanting from gURPS Thaumaturgy Sorcery, or Metatronic generators that were introduced in Pyramid 354 and expanded in gURPS Monster Hunters Power-Ups 1. Most of the underlying principles are the same. You create the effect you want with advantages, apply limitations that represent what the item is, a sword, a ring, or whatever other item type, and then calculate the price based on the final point value. While some parts of both systems might have different names, they all actually are the same. For example, the item form modifiers are all based on the gadget modifiers from the gURPS basic set. So if you find something, for example the bulk limitations from Metatronic generators, feel free to use them in enchanting in sorcery. I find the fact that sorcery enchanting renames the final point value of the item to EP, enchantment points, to be something that can confuse the player or the GM. It might even make them think that it's much more complicated than it actually is. Basically speaking, there's nothing different between designing an ability and an enchanted item. While both systems allow you to design a custom item and determine its monetary value, Metatronic generators do not have any enchanting or crafting mechanics. Sorcerer's Enchanting does have such mechanics, and these mechanics are intertwined with the way the monetary cost is determined. Metatronic generators determine the cost using the points to value conversion guidelines from the gURPS basic set. Sorcerer's Enchanting bases the monetary price of the item on the amount of time the enchanter has to spend enchanting the item, using the typical wages from the gURPS basic set. Thus, these prices are economically consistent. If you design the same item using Metatronic generators and sorcery enchanting, you will get different costs, sometimes wildly different. The costs also scale differently with the point values. Metatronic generators have a linear scaling, which sometimes results in very powerful items having relatively low costs. Sorcerer's Enchantment has a different scaling. This results in powerful items costing a lot of money, but low power items also have sometimes relatively high prices. You probably do not want to use both of the systems at once. Choose one or the other, but I will come back to that later. Let's take a look at one D&D item made with Sorcerer's Enchantment and Metatronic generators. I think the Ring of Protection is a simple item that would show the difference. Technically speaking, the Metatronic generator version of the ring should not cost FP to use. Usually on sorcery items drain 1 FP per hour, and I think that's fair. By the way, contrary to the popular belief, this is not something sorcery invented. This rule is described under long-term ability use on page 159 of gURPS powers, in the Abilities and Exertion box. This is just another case of people only reading the advantage section of that book. I must once again emphasize that gURPS powers is much more than that. It solves almost all questions related to powers. This tiny rule helps keeping magic items in check. No character will be able to have too many magic items active at once. This example also shows how different are the prices, especially at high TL. But we do not care about high TLs. We are playing D&D, right? What I don't like about the Metatronic generator pricing is that some items might be too cheap. This may result in what I call the cybernetics problem. On high TL, it is much more efficient to purchase the wealth advantage and buy cybernetics with money than to spend character points on them. A similar problem may arise here. gURPS Basics has rules that can solve that, but many people ignore them for some reason. In any case, I prefer to use Sorcerer's Enchanting, mostly because there is a way to actually enchant the items, and because the price is economically justified. But if you do not care about crafting, feel free to use Metatronic generators, there's nothing bad about them. I keep praising Sorcerer's Enchanting, but I also have some criticism to offer. The most important one is that single-use items such as alchemical elixirs or scrolls cost so much that they basically are never worth it, and such items are a D&D staple that you wouldn't want to omit. So this is how I do things. I use Sorcerer's Enchanting for everything except alchemical elixirs, scrolls, constructs, and grafts. The latter two are an entirely different matter that still are somewhat based on Sorcerer's Enchanting. Alchemical elixirs and scrolls are based on Metatronic generators. I will discuss them in separate videos. I also have some additional suggestions. Use resonant designs and materials from page 110 of gURPS Thaumatology. Maximum discount for enchanting is 15%. This discount is applied to the full cost of the item before applying the form multiplier. This is a very flavorful rule in my opinion, and it does not upset the balance or consistency. Single-use items are allowed to be enchanted in batches, like Sorcerer's Elixirs. For example, this is relevant for projectiles, as otherwise magical arrows would have a ridiculous price. Each additional projectile in a batch will add a half of its multiplier. Always on should be allowed on some non-weapon items such as bags of holding, eternal torches, etc. Consult with the GM if you are not sure. This is an arbitrary thing that is resolved on the case-by-case basis. Also, I introduced the new Use Enchanted Item skill. I will show it on the screen. By default, when using Sorcerer's Enchanting, enchanters can only enchant items with spells they know, but I think it would be fair to allow additional limitations, such as limited use, without treating it as a separate spell. I will talk about that in more detail in another video devoted to artificers. Anyway, the most important thing here is that magic items will not be the same as in D&D. They will be much more expensive, hard to procure, and generally rare. Adventurers will not be the so-called Christmas trees full of magic items. They will have few, if any, magic items, and they will value them. Items will not have this mass-produced feel to them. They are much more likely to be unique. So you will not have a +2 longsword of Icy Burst, you will have a Glacier Blade, the sword of the famous knight that used it to defeat a red dragon. If you want to make magic items more common, consider using Metatronic generators to make them cheaper, and maybe even introduce an arbitrary cost divisor. But I actually like the changes that are introduced by Sorcerer's Enchanting, so I am absolutely content with that. Just like everything in GURPS, it's all up to you. And that's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.